Welcome back, Ascend family, to the Sermon Recap Podcast. I'm Pastor John, joined here again, as always, with Pastor Mitch.
Good morning.
Good morning. We're going to go over the sermon from yesterday. A little bit of an odd one, I think.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I'm just going to start reading. You tell me when to stop.
Go for it.
And we'll go. So it says, King Herod heard of it.
Stop.
Go ahead.
Well, let's talk there for a minute.
All right.
Yeah, we did this yesterday, and so this story is thrusting us in real time to King Herod hearing of something, which is obviously what has just happened in the story.
Right.
So recap for us.
Yeah, so the disciples have just been sent out, and the last part of the paragraph, and we're in chapter 6, by the way, I don't think I mentioned that, but 6:13 says that they had cast out many demons, anointed with oil, many who were sick, and healed them. And so, like, Jesus' popularity, the disciples' popularity as Jesus has sent them out, has spread.
Yeah, so this is what King Herod has heard of. Okay, all right, pick back up, back in action.
King Herod heard of it, for Jesus' name had become known. Some said John the Baptist had been raised from the dead. That is why miraculous powers are at work in him. But others said he is Elijah, and others said he is a prophet like the prophets of old. But when Herod heard of it, he said, "This is John, whom I beheaded, has raised."
All right, let's pause there for a second.
Yeah.
So we're again, this is a story that we're diving into, and we talked about this yesterday. And so it's important that we understand the characters, you know, who are going to be the main characters in this story. And King Herod, I would say, is probably the central figure that's involved throughout this entire story.
Yeah.
And then secondly, there's the person of John the Baptist. And so just if you weren't with us there this week, just to give you a brief overview of who these two figures are. You want to do King Herod or you want to do John the Baptist? You take your pick. You flip a coin?
Sure.
I don't have a coin.
All right.
Pick a number, one or two.
2.
All right. I didn't even do numbers. So you go with John the Baptist. I'll do King Herod.
Okay. You start.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So King Herod, again, is a central figure in the biblical narrative. There are many King Herods, and this King Herod that we're talking about is King Herod Antipas. He's mentioned in Luke's gospel as the King Herod the Tetrarch is the word. Mm-hmm. And what that means is that he is over he has been given authority by Rome to be over a quarter, a tetrarch, that's what it means. It's a quarter of this Jewish province. And so he's kind of operating as the leader underneath Roman authority. Mm-hmm. And so he's somewhat of a powerful person. He's not the most powerful person. I just mentioned that because at some point in time, I think we read these stories about these King Herods and we're like, oh, they had unbelievable power. But it's actually funny. We'll get in later the dynamics of their family, but his story actually comes to the end because he goes to a king and he asks for more. He goes to the leader of Rome and he asks for more and they say no, and then they take all his power away. And so, yes, but he's somewhat of a powerful person over this province, this Jewish territory and like Galilee region. And he also, He also he is Jewish, but underneath Roman authority. Yeah. So like now he's not necessarily, I wouldn't say he's like practicing. Nobody looked at King Herod and was like, this is an example of what it looks like to be a faithful, obedient, believer in Yahweh. But that is his background. And so now we'll get into the messiness of who he is. I mean, he's a very inward focused leader. He's really out for himself. And that's revealed enough in this story alone.
Yeah. Yeah. If you think of Herod, like the one who killed all the babies in Luke 2.
That's his dad.
That's his dad. Yeah. So just to bring a little context to that.
Yeah.
So,
and his dad was considered to be a more powerful ruler than he was.
Yeah.
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 All right. So that's King Herod. Give us John the Baptist.
So John the Baptist, we talked at the beginning of Mark. He was the forerunner to Jesus. He was the one who the book of Isaiah prophesied would prepare the way for Jesus. And so we first are introduced to him in chapter 1, right from the get-go. That's where Mark starts. Right after he says, this is the account of Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of God, he jumps right into, and John appeared.
Yeah.
And so John is the one who was baptizing in the wilderness, calling people to repentance to prepare the way for the Lord.
Yeah. Had a massive following.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Similar to probably Jesus's following, like just people wanting to hear what he has to say. And then, I mean, we'll get into later on in this why he was arrested.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So let's pick up. Let's
All
keep
right.
going then.
Let's find where I was here. All right. For it was Herod who had sent and seized John and bound him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because he had married her. For John had been saying to Herod, "It is not lawful for you to marry your brother's wife." And Herodias had a grudge against him and wanted to put him to death, but she could not, for Herod feared John, knowing that he was a righteous and holy man, and he kept him safe. When he heard him, he was greatly perplexed, and yet he heard him gladly.
All right, let's pause there for a second, because this is, I mean, again, even as someone who was preaching through this, man, I had to read through this and stop so many times just to make sure I understood all that's taking place.
Yeah.
And so our story begins, and King Herod heard of it, and it gives us a reference to in real time him hearing about the work and ministry of Jesus and the disciples.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's these rumors that are said that, this Jesus, maybe he's even John, back from the dead. And Herod's like, how would that be possible? Because I killed John, which is where this story is going. And then it flashes back and it starts to talk about when he arrested John, which is what you were just alluding to, which in Mark chapter 1, it talks about John being arrested. And we learn now that John was arrested because basically he was calling out King Herod for marrying his brother's wife.
Right.
And how that was unholy.
Yeah.
And just calling
it would have
out.
been just straight from the book of Leviticus. I think Leviticus 11, I think it is, where it's just like, it just lays it out that I think it's literally word for word. You cannot take your brother's wife.
Yeah.
And so that's all John's doing is just calling that out.
And so John is calling that out. And so King Herod is frustrated by it, but even more frustrated by it is his wife, Herodias. And this is where I said on Sunday, like, this is where the soap opera begins, which side note that this is something that has nothing to do with the Bible. So, right, but I want to go here for a second. Do you know what the root of the term soap opera is?
No.
Yeah, I was Googling this because I was thinking about using that phrase, like soap opera. They're called soap operas because they were operas, again, is actually more, it's from the word like creative display. Okay. So that's what opera is. Soap opera is literally because they used to advertise soap during them. Did you know that? That's literally so now it's commonplace that we call them soap operas, but it was literally, they were originally called soap operas only because the ads were soap.
Interesting.
So side note, but the soap opera begins here. Okay. This is crazy breakdown of these dynamics, and we're introduced to Herodias, and Herodias, the text calls him his brother's wife, which is a little bit of a dig, because they are actually married. But she also is his brother's wife. But as we looked at on Sunday, when you look at the family tree, not only is she his brother's wife, she's actually his niece. Like, that's how jacked up this family is. And so Herod's brother has married his niece, and then then Herod has now married her.
Right.
And so it's just kind of a mess of a family. Like, there's sin all throughout this story. And Herodias is a pretty, like King Herod's evil, but she's even probably a little bit more evil and direct. And so while he's bothered by John, Herodias, it says, like, has a grudge against him.
She held a grudge against him.
Yeah, like she's coming for him. Like, she wants to see him dead.
Yeah. And I mean, we'll get to people pleasing here in a minute, but like, that's a part of the people pleasing in her. She wants to look good.
Yeah.
So she's holding a grudge because he dared to call her out in front of whoever it was they were in front of.
Yeah, so much of their power and authority is built off of making other people happy.
Yep.
If it's Rome or it's these other military leaders. And so when you live your life that way, like, that's what you're constantly after.
Yeah,
and so they're like, hey,
that image.
John, don't get in our way.
Yeah, so it continues, and it said, an opportunity came when Herod on his birthday gave a banquet for his nobles and military commanders and the leading men of Galilee. For when Herodias' daughter came and danced, she pleased Herod and his guests. And the king said to the girl, ask me for whatever you wish, and I will give it to you. And he vowed to her, whatever you ask me, I will give you up to half my kingdom. And she went outside to her mother and said, for what should I ask? And she said, the head of John the Baptist. And she came in immediately, with haste, to the king and asked, saying, I want you to give me the head of John the Baptist on a platter. And the king was exceedingly sorry, but because of his oaths and his guests, he did not want to break his word to the girl. And immediately the king sent an executioner with orders to bring John's head. And he went and beheaded him in prison and brought his head on a platter and gave it to the girl, and the girl gave it to her mother. And his disciples, when they heard it, came and took the body and laid it in a tomb.
Yeah. Okay. So let's make sure we're capturing again all the details that happen in this story, which I'll kind of pause there for a second. It's this is a fun narrative passage to preach through. Like I mentioned on Sunday, we're more storytellers here than we're really like trying to exegete the text. We're just trying to make sure we understand all the details around this story and immerse ourselves in it. Yeah. So as this party begins, the main event of this party, kind of like the big act, is a dance by King Herod's stepdaughter. As I mentioned on Sunday, if you look at the original language, or you look at how this dance would be described, this was not like ballet. This wasn't performative. This was a sensual, like sexual act or display, which again, let's just register one more time the messed up dynamics of this family. This is his stepdaughter.
Yep.
Which means it's his wife's daughter. And yet they're willing to put her before all these leaders and these military leaders and perform this dance for them. And then not only do you like do it and you're like, oh, like we got what we want, but we regret it. It's like, no, they were thrilled.
Yeah.
He was happy.
It pleased the guest.
Yeah, it pleased the guest, and therefore it pleased Herod, which, dude, there could be a whole sermon in that itself. Yeah. It pleased them, therefore it pleased him. And so that's the first thing. Like that's what's going on in this party, which I think really gives us a picture of worldliness, like sin turned inward, how parties can go awry, how when people are there just to please themselves, how they'll go to all ends to make themselves be pleased, And there's so many nasty displays of this. Like I'm not trying to be culturally relevant, but I will mention it on the podcast. I didn't think it was appropriate to mention in the service, but it's like you hear about all that's going on with these things around like these Diddy parties. I don't want to make it like I'm not trying to like just be culturally relevant, but it's like those at one point in time were parties that people probably thought were fun. That sin got turned inward more and more and more. And once you had a taste of something, you just wanted more of it. And think of how nasty that gets. This is kind of what we're witnessing in this story in the ancient world. And we know this is what parties were often like in the ancient world.
Right.
So I don't want to dive into that because it's such a terrible thing, but it's like, this is, it's a party that a group of people were there doing terrible things, but at the same time they loved it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think by Mark saying she held a grudge, it's actually like foreshadowing what's about to happen.
Yeah.
When her daughter goes out to ask her, it's like no hesitation. The head of John the Baptist.
Yeah. And so just that too. So this is this dance that's happening. It's people are loving it. And then next thing you know, King Herod's like, man, I'm so proud of you. I'm so glad of what you did. You can have anything you want. Just ask. And so she goes to her mom and she says, hey, like, what should I ask for? And then it's like without a drop of a hat.
Yeah.
And
he uses a lot of, we made fun of him earlier about using all the immediatelys and everything like that. And this last part,
it says immediately.
The word immediately it's there twice, but then there's also an immediately with haste. Yeah. So it's like, not only did it happen like that,
when we say make fun of him, we're talking about Mark too. Like Mark,
making fun of Mark using
the term
immediate.
Like that. It's his favorite word.
Yeah.
And he uses it all the time throughout the gospel narrative. And here we see it used, like you said, multiple times.
One after the other.
Boom, boom, boom. There wasn't hesitation. There wasn't debate. There wasn't argument. It was like, this is what they went and did.
Yeah. And so
what they go do?
Yeah, they executed him.
Yeah.
They put his head on a platter and brought it out in front of all the guests.
Yep.
And as one of the things we were trying to think through, and I mean Summer and I, as we were talking through, what do we do for kids? Because we've been doing the same thing in kids as we're doing in the adult.
What did
service.
You guys do?
We ended up saying the theme was stand for truth.
Yeah.
Like that's essentially what John was doing. He stood up for what was right.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it cost him his life, he still stood for what was right.
Yeah.
And so like our challenge to the kids this week was stand for what is right, even if it's difficult.
Yeah.
Like
that's good.
Under peer pressure, you're not liked by your friends. Like if it is right, do what is right.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of where we went with it.
Which I think kind of leads us into the next part. And so you read this story, and as we said, it's the only story in Mark's gospel that doesn't directly deal with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
He's not the central figure of this story. It kind of seems like it veers off to a random path. It's not even taking place in active time. He's flashbacking to past experiences.
Yeah.
And so we go, why is this here?
Yeah.
And as I shared, like last week when we sat down to record this podcast, I was kind of going like, I can tell the story, but like I need to wrestle more with while it's here.
Yeah.
And I think as we do that, you actually find that like while it is unique in Mark's narrative, there's so much here.
Mm-hmm.
So much to wrestle with. It's a heavy story, it's a weighty story. It's real. It reveals things about ourselves. It reveals things about the world in which we live. And so I think what you said is one of those great examples. Like, you could just simply follow the thread of like, John stands for truth and he's killed for it. What other threads?
You've got the disciples are sent out and accepted for their message that they're giving. John is essentially like he's preaching the gospel of repentance. But, he calls out sin and but so the cost of discipleship, there's a thread there.
Mm-hmm.
I was also just thinking like this also, without giving too much away, this story and the next story are connected, I think.
Yeah.
What Mark is trying to show you is overall through the book is that Jesus is the true king.
Yeah.
And so he shows you what a ruler of Rome looks like, which these people would have known.
Yeah.
And then he shows you what Jesus looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got the contrast of two kingdoms. Yeah. One kingdom is there to serve itself.
Yep.
The other kingdom is there for the greater good of people and has compassion on people. One banquet, one kingdom leads to death. The other one gives life.
Yep.
And meets human needs. Like,
that's so good.
And so I probably just gave most of our next podcast away, but that's okay. But I think that's part of why it's here is it's there to bridge the gap and connect earthly kingdoms versus heavenly kingdoms. And which one would you rather be a part of?
And I think if I were to be encouraging you all in your small group discussions, I think because there's so much here in this text, I would be encouraging you to go like, what is the truth that you pull out of this story that connects the most with you or speaks the most to where you're at? That one you just mentioned was the one for me. I as I read this story, I almost was like, this is the main idea. But then I was like, well, it's actually not. There's no main idea to this story. There's just multiple truths that it reveals.
Yeah.
And for me, it was that picture of earthly kingdoms serving themselves.
Yeah.
And then I mentioned the personal one for me, which you said a little bit earlier, was just the people-pleasing dynamics of this story. Yeah. Just watching this wrestling of King Herod in his desire to people please and receive the praise of man, and going to all ends to see that happen, And then as you also mentioned that it shows the death that so many of Jesus's disciples will go through, that cost of discipleship picture.
Yeah. I was reading a commentary about this, and that was one of the things it brought up was like all of the disciples that he sent in the previous paragraph will end up dying a death similar to John's.
Yep.
Like, it's a foreshadowing of this is what it's going to cost to follow Jesus the way he asked you to follow him.
Yep.
And so,
and then Christ himself.
Yeah.
There's so many parallels, in this story, and Christ
Herod's in both of them.
Yeah, and Herod, the same Herod is in both of them. And
Yep.
so it's weighty, guys. I think it's one of those things that, like, it's a good story for us to sit in, to not skip over, to remind ourselves again of just the cost of this movement of Jesus, you know, and how many in the world will flat out not only just deny it, but go to all ends to stop it.
Yeah.
And that's what we see here. And
yeah.
And so, I mean, I'm sitting in it all week. It was one that moved me, you know, personally.
Yeah. And so that's good. One of the things I just thought of, when I went on mission trips with Corey Freeman, one of the elders here,
the one that we were
at
talking
Redeemer,
about doing athletic feats a couple weeks ago on the podcast, right?
One of the things that he always wanted to define for us, especially our group, because we were going to India, was persecution isn't just like putting you in prison or whatever.
Yeah.
Persecution is silencing the witness. So like they just want you to stop talking, essentially. And so like when you see John, this is obviously an extreme example.
Yeah.
But not only did they throw him in prison because they needed him to stop talking in public.
Yeah.
Then they eventually took his head because they just need him to cease talking completely. Yeah. And so I don't know why that came to my mind, but it did. I thought I would bring it up.
Yeah.
But
no, again, it is a picture of persecution, and we would be remiss to not mention that there are Christians around the world today that are being persecuted and killed for their faith. And as I mentioned, I heard a testimony of a group of them that were being persecuted, and that, as you said, like they were like the person that was killing them messed up by saying that they were killing them because of their work in Jesus, because they're like, that accomplishes.
That's why we're here.
Faith. And so, I'd encourage you guys, again, just sit in the weightiness of this story this week. Discuss it. I don't know, most of our small groups have ended, but like I would just go to someone and go like, man, like, has my faith became something that it isn't of substance? Like it doesn't have weight. And can I recognize that there are people that have been faithful to the end? And then the other piece, as we said, like, even though we speak of the sadness of that, those people are celebrating a great banquet right now.
It's good. Got anything else?
That's what I got.
All right. Ascend, you are loved. We will see you on Sunday.